Some years, time slips through your grasp, a fleeting and elusive force. Yet others, you masterfully escape time's relentless pursuit, transcending its constraints. Travel has always been a magical force, giving pause to the monotony and breathing life into every second of every day. Each new experience, every new location, stimulating the senses, expanding our mental horizons. This year in particular, 2023, I practiced being present in every moment, being intentional, making new friends, catching up with old, and going all in on the passion projects that fuel my soul. Here's a little recap of the year that pivoted my life. The year I decided to travel full-time and started this channel to tell visual stories of places, cultures, and experiences around the world. Although these memories are mostly for me, I hope you find some inspiration as I chronicle my life's path and this journey to 25 countries in a year. My year started in Mexico City, a place I could return to every year. Close enough to home, but far enough away to get my creative juices flowing. A city full of comfort and familiarity, yet exotic and evokes the feeling of travel. I invited my sister and brother-in-law to join me to show them one of my favorite places, my favorite bakeries and bars, and cultural experiences. A great way to start my year, surrounded by family and a place to dream about the year ahead. After 2 weeks in Mexico, I was back in the skies, embarking on a 5-month venture that would jet set me around the world, visiting some of my favorite places and exploring uncharted territory. I soon landed in El Salvador, a place and region of the world that quite honestly didn't excite me. Yet after a month, I quickly fell in love. My college roommate flew in from Bolivia to meet up with me, and we had one of the best months, catching up on life and exploring the world together. We spent 2 years of our lives living in the same room, sharing our deepest thoughts. After almost 9 years, it was time for a reunion, living out of backpacks, hiking mountains, renting scooters, swimming, partying, and revisiting those deep conversations that would keep us up all night. We started in San Salvador. We hiked some volcanoes, explored ancient ruins, visited coffee plantations, hopped on chicken buses, ate way too many pupusas, dreamed about the future, and completely lost ourselves and time as we melted into the black sand beaches of El Tunco. We never wanted to leave that beach, but alas, Nicaragua called our names. A long bus ride took us through Honduras, and we woke up in León, the city of 1,000 churches. When we ascended the main cathedral, we were greeted by the epic cone-shaped volcanoes that surrounded the town and beckoned adventure. We loaded into a huge truck and hiked to the top of the world's newest volcano, Cerro Negro, only to sled down the side in 24.8 seconds. From the peak, we caught a glimpse of our next adventure, Tele volcano. Smoke billowed from its crater just a few meters from where we camped under the stars. The Nika path led us to Granada next, a small, colorful town on Lake Nicaragua and a backpacker's haven. Every Friday, everyone you have met on the journey through Central America culminates here for the famous Treehouse Party, an all-night rave deep in the jungle. It was a reunion of all of our friends and a night that will never be forgotten. Ready for some rest and relaxation, we found ourselves on the mystical Ometepe Island, an island full of chocolate and hippies. We rented scooters and explored every inch of the figure-8 island. The sun was setting on our Central America trip, but we have the shared memories and laughs that will outlive it and a fresh spark in our friendship. We spent a few days in Costa Rica before our life paths diverged. I was on my way back to India, a place that fills me with wonder almost as much as the anxiety and claustrophobia it induces. As a travel photographer, it is one of my favorite places to shoot. A place so rich in culture, color, and heritage. A place that wears me to my core, yet draws me back in after a few years of its absence in my life. But this trip was accomplishing one of my bucket list items, to throw myself headfirst into the color-throwing party that takes over the streets of India, Holi. I met up with some of my friends I had met in a hostel in Poland a few months ago, when we hatched this plan to meet up again. We had no idea what to expect the next 3 days, but it was insane. Easily the craziest 3 days of my life. There was no escaping the chaos. Your presence there was consent to get completely obliterated by color, and the streets were packed with people. There were some alleys that were so packed with people it literally crushed my lungs. But all of this was worth it as I wore the biggest smile those 3 days and made memories for a lifetime. We survived the chaos and then headed east towards Varanasi, a different kind of chaos. This is the most intense place I've ever been in the world, and this was my 3rd time returning here. It's the holiest place for Hindus, and where dead bodies are burned in the hopes of escaping the endless cycle of humanity. It's dark yet hopeful. A place to sit on the banks of the Ganges, people watch, and contemplate the meaning of life. Like any exceptionally holy site, I believe everyone should visit here at least once in their life. From the holiest place in Hinduism, I took a ride out to one of Buddhism's most revered sites, Bodh Gaya. This was the place of the First Enlightenment, now a holy pilgrimage site for all sects of Buddhism to come and seek to obtain the state of mind that altered the prince's way of life forever. I continued east across the subcontinent of India to a city that I had never visited before, Kolkata. It was a completely different style of India. I felt like I was on the set of a movie in the early 1900s. Old cars and trams and bridges brightened this bleak landscape with traces of the old British Empire that once occupied this region. One last place I wanted to see before my 30-day India visa expired was Darjeeling. Simply the name drew me, which evokes visions of bright green tea fields with the Himalayas towering in the distance. It was way colder than I expected and the weather was gloomy, but all the more reason to get cozy and sip some tea and of course take the famous Darjeeling Express through the mountains. My visa was about to expire and India had done its job of fully exhausting me again, so it was time to move on to a new country and visit some friends in the peaceful rice fields of Bangladesh. I flew down to Cox's Bazar and was immediately thrown into the local way of life. Right across the street from the airport, which felt more like a bus stop, there was an open-air fish market. There I joined Samo and Janelle on a trip down to their home towards some of the largest refugee camps in the world. It was an eye-opening experience seeing firsthand these massive villages, home to millions, haphazardly rolling through these beautiful landscapes. It was so good to have a week to wind down after India and before heading back up to one of the most densely populated cities in the world, Dhaka. This was real rugged adventure though, and one of the reasons I fell in love with travel. Seeing a city completely devoid of tourism and seeing the true way of life here. I loved all of the bike rickshaws that were so colorfully decorated and taking them from site to site, weaving through the old streets of Dhaka to the soundtrack of the small bike bells. The next morning I had a very early flight to one of my most highly anticipated trips of the year, the magical Dragon Kingdom of Bhutan. A small mountain country tucked away between the global behemoths of China and India. A very complicated and expensive tourism visa intentionally keeps most people away, encouraging a low-volume, high-impact travel experience. It was not cheap, but in a world full of travelers looking for that perfect Instagram selfie, it was so nice to experience Bhutan in a respectful and educational way. I hired a personal tour guide that led me around the country for 3 days. We went deep into the culture and met a handful of smiling faces contributing to one of the happiest countries in the world. Bhutan has such a distinct architectural style, blending the governmental and spiritual disciplines into these incredible dzongs, or palaces. The trip culminated with a hike to the famous Tiger's Nest Monastery, a strenuous hike to these cliffside temples. I also planned the trip around one of their cultural festivals, or seichus. One of my main travel goals this year was to capture some of these unique cultural festivals that celebrate our stories of humanity and spirituality. This festival was full of color and dancing and an incredible portal into this kingdom that remains a mystery to most of the world still. Bhutan left me wanting to explore more and go further, but my short visa was up. I was back in the skies, soaring over the tallest mountains in the world to Kathmandu, Nepal. This was mostly a long layover on the way to my next mountain destination. I had spent a month in Nepal previously, during the 2015 earthquakes. I wanted to come back and see the city that had been reduced to ruins back on its feet. The streets of Kathmandu are so alive. Wandering through Tamil, there are hundreds of mountain shops for the countless treks Nepal provides, juxtaposed against centuries-old temples. The city is the perfect base camp for the Himalayas, and I will soon return, but I was off to another lesser-known mountain region to rival the Himalayas, Pakistan. I was so excited to go to yet another new country. I landed in Islamabad, a fairly new capital city. It's not really the most exciting place to visit, but had a few green hills surrounding the valley. It also has one of the world's largest mosques with a very sharp, modern design. These were a few fun places to explore as we supplied for our trip deep into the Karakoram Mountains. A 16-hour overnight bus ride was the only affordable way to Gilgit, our first stop in the mountains. From here we took some less reliable-looking jeeps up the world's most dangerous road. Steep cliffs with no barriers beckoned our death as these men spoke no English tore through the landscape with their eyes practically closed. I could barely keep my eyes open on the journey up, but as soon as the hike began to Fairy Meadows, I never wanted to close them. It was the most beautiful hike I'd ever been on, and given how unreliable mountain weather can be, we had the most perfect blue skies for all 3 hiking days. The entire trek, my neck craned to view the 26,660-foot high landmass that towered above us. I'd never seen such grandiose nature up close, and there are no words for the feeling it evokes. Nanga Parbat is the 9th tallest mountain and has only ever been summited by a handful of brave hikers. I'll never forget the feeling of watching the pink sunset against the glaciers. The next Pakistan adventure took us deeper into the mountains towards the border of China. I was too optimistic to think we would have such beautiful weather the whole time in the mountains, as clouds soon shrouded our view and inclement weather made hiking miserable. Despite the pouring rain, I was on a mission to walk across the sketchiest rope bridge in the world. I neglected to consider crossing once meant I would have to cross twice to return over the raging river. The weather made the hike just that much more intense. It was soon snowing on me as I peered over a massive glacier. The thing about glaciers is you can never really understand the depth and scale of these chunks of ice because it has such a foreign landscape with nothing to relate its size to. Its beauty simply blew me away, and I forgot how cold, wet, and miserable the journey was, or exactly how remote I was in the world. And as I returned to town, I was finally rewarded with the most stunning views of the Pasu cones through the clouds. The only way to return down this mountain passage was to hitchhike. My friends and I had a few epic rides in the back of trucks, but the most insane was riding through the mountain highway in pouring sleet, hanging on for our dear lives onto the back of an oil trucker. The Karakoram had a few more epic hikes, but still being early in the season, most base camps were still entirely covered in snow, but that didn't stop me from getting as close as possible to nature's giants. Instead of returning to Islamabad, Benoit and I headed towards the border of Afghanistan to Peshawar. Another moment of true exploration as we went well off the beaten path to this small Pakistani village that is highly advised not to visit. But what we found were the most hospitable people. No one allowed us to buy any food or drink. Everything was a gift. A sign of over-the-top hospitality, once again confirming that people are not their governments and that true humanity shows itself in the most unexpected places. Not to even mention how beautiful and historic this fascinating city is, with incredible old mansions and unbelievable mosques. 3 weeks in Pakistan was unbelievable, but after a few weeks of camping and roughing it, the comforts of Dubai were very welcome. I spent a week here to recover, and I attended a creators conference. It was very inspiring to meet so many others on their respective journeys of telling stories around the world, and great to catch my breath in one of my favorite global cities. A week was enough in Dubai before I started to get antsy to explore new places. My next stop was a country few can place on a map, Tajikistan. I landed in Dushanbe with absolutely no expectations. Dushanbe was elegant, Beautiful buildings and museums on tree-lined streets, powerful statues through all the parks, and towering monuments dominate the skyline, with the Pamir Mountains creating the horizon. Far from the Silk Road you would imagine, yet a small blue mosque remains with the tiling and minarets that reminisce of an era dominated by silk and spice trade. After a day or two, I was in a shared taxi to the north, through the mountains towards the Uzbekistan border. Panjikent is a small access town to the Seven Lakes hike that takes you through tiny traditional villages on the shores of these magical blue bodies of water. I spent a few days camping in this unspoiled wilderness, far from the nearest Wi-Fi signal. It was a quick trip over the border to Uzbekistan, and I was soon wandering the majestic streets of Samarkand, the jewel of the Silk Road. This was everything you want the Silk Road to be. Ornate madrasas, or Islamic schools, lined the streets with intricate tiling and cerulean blue tiles reflecting the color of the sky. Samarkand was the first and last stop on my Uzbekistan trip, but in between I took a week to head deeper into the country to a few more traditional Silk Road cities. Khiva was my furthest and first stop. This small fortified city was a true step back in time. Camels replaced cars through these winding streets as I stepped in and out of ancient palaces, mosques, and madrasas. Dust-colored bricks were interwoven with the iconic Uzbekistan blue tiles, while colorful markets sprawled through the streets. On my way back towards Samarkand, I stopped in Bukhara, Samarkand's main competitor for Jewel of the Silk Road. Very similar in size and scale to Samarkand, more madrasas and mosques told ancient stories along the mud-packed streets. Old Silk Road trading domes have transformed into tourist markets, and plazas have been turned into street cafes. I returned to Samarkand for a few more days to really soak in the feeling of living in history before continuing on with my journey. My flight skidded along the runway to stunning snow-capped views of Mount Ararat, only visible to the Armenians, but not accessible just over the border in Turkey. From the airport, I jumped straight into my rental car and started a 3-day road trip through this beautiful country. I drove through winding golden hills as I went from monastery to monastery through the epic countryside. The homeland of modern church history, Armenia is full of historic relics. Each monastery is tucked away in some of the most beautiful natural settings. Whether it's Mount Ararat as the backdrop, or high in the cliffs, or perched on an island, or overlooking a canyon, each monastery was a delight to visit. My road trip terminated in the capital city Yerevan, as I took a weekend break to explore this European-esque city. It was such an elegant and friendly place, beautiful streets full of wine bars and cafes, extensive museums, and the cascade on the edge of town. A hike up this concrete staircase offers sweeping views of the city below and the countryside I drove through the past few days. From here I flew to Cyprus, a small island country in the Mediterranean. I came with grand plans to explore every inch of the island on my week here. But as soon as I landed, I simply booked a nice hotel for a week. I needed to slow down and enjoy life, not document every second of it. The beach was visible from my window, and the small city of Larnaca was an easy afternoon stroll. I lived the slow life for a week and realized that I needed more of that. Soon I was in Paris for a long layover, a city I have visited a handful of times, yet know little more than the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe. I didn't have much more time this trip, but went a little bit deeper. I found Europe's largest antique weekend market and slowly wandered the beautiful streets, spilling with cute shops and cafes. I learned of Paris's appeal and vowed to spend more time exploring France. This was it for my 6-month trip. It was time to return to the US for a few months. It was peak wedding season, so I was all over the country documenting beautiful love stories. I also did a week-long bike trip with my family and 50,000 other enthusiastic cyclists across Iowa on the RAGBRAI. It was the hottest week of the month, and we biked on average 80 miles a day from small Iowan town to small Iowan town. But it was a blast as the whole state turns into one moving festival. Soon summer diminished and it was time to travel again. Learning my lesson in Cyprus, I knew I wanted to slow travel the rest of the year, to get to know places on a deeper level, more intimately. It took a while to think of the perfect place, but once it crossed my mind, I knew it was the right choice. Tokyo, Japan. The world's largest city. A place I once visited in 2017 for 4 days, but knew I didn't do it justice. How could I get bored in the world's largest city? A perfect place to be stationed, but full of activities. I vowed to never leave Tokyo for the month, and forced myself to stay in one place. I simply walked almost every inch of the city. It was my favorite thing to do, just walk. I wanted to see most every neighborhood and really know what life is like here. It was fascinating. I feel most at home surrounded by a language I don't understand in a foreign culture. I'm an observer, an outsider looking in, and Japan was perfect for that. The crazy part is when you don't move every other day, time flies by. Soon my month was over, and I was on to my next destination, Scotland. I'd been to London a handful of times, but never seen any other part of the island. I arrived in Inverness, the gateway to the Highlands, a small city but the UK's most northern outpost. Quaint churches and small streets split by the River Ness and a castle on the hill. Mountains beckoning you to go further, more remote into the Highlands. After a day, I was off to the Isle of Skye. I was beyond excited to see this epic remote island known for picturesque, rugged landscapes. A 5-year vow renewal for some close friends is what brought me here. They rented a car and we drove all over the legendary landscape as they renewed their vows. Such an epic way to experience the island. They dropped me off in Portree, a beautiful coastal town with a colorful port. I felt like I was living in a movie as I meandered through these quiet fishing villages. I found a window in the unpredictable weather to hike out to the Old Man of Store, these giant black volcanic pillars overlooking the dramatic coastline. I extended my stay, not wanting to leave the cozy, peaceful cottages that felt like they were from a fairy tale. I only left the island because I saw there was only one clear day forecasted on Ben Nevis, the UK's highest peak and a mountain notorious for never seeing the sun. I whisked by a few mythical castles and a rusty shipwreck on my way down to Fort William. The meteorologists were right, and I had the most perfect hiking day to summit Ben Nevis and stand the tallest person in the British Isles. I couldn't leave the Highlands without a detour to the Harry Potter train bridge, a curved series of stone archways made famous from the second movie car flying scene. In the spirit of Harry Potter, I was off to Edinburgh, a city that was a big inspiration to J.K. Rowling. It was time to slow down my travels again. I spent 2.5 weeks living in this perfect European city, complete with colorful winding streets, a castle on the hill, and church steeples spiring above the cobblestone. A spooky place to spend the month of October through Halloween. I returned to New York for a few weeks to celebrate Thanksgiving before returning to Europe for my much-anticipated Christmas market tour. I've always loved Christmas and dreamed of coming to Europe during the holiday season to see all of the quaint town squares become festive winter wonderlands. I landed in Frankfurt and took a quick train down to Heidelberg for my first market. A 16th century castle towers over the small village while the market squares were filled with wooden chalets and beautifully crafted German stalls. My next stop was Strasbourg, France, probably my favorite market on the tour. It's the oldest Christmas market dating back to the 1500s, and its traditions are rich. The whole city turns into a Christmas masterpiece with lavish storefronts and markets in every plaza. Next was Luxembourg, a gorgeous fortified city on a hill. Massive Christmas displays adorned the town squares, and festive rides gave the city a fair-like atmosphere. Then I headed up to Liège, Belgium, the largest Christmas market on my tour. The huge Saint Lambert Plaza is turned into a Christmas village with over 100 shops and restaurants wrapping around a Ferris wheel and a toboggan sledding hill. My last market stop was Valkenburg, Netherlands. This was by far the most unique market stop, with Europe's largest underground cave markets. A series of mining caves weave under the city and is turned into a Christmas shopping hub with stores, cafes, and millions of festive lights. After visiting all of these markets and getting into the Christmas spirit, I ended with a few days to relax in London. I am always inspired walking along these historic streets and along the Thames River, admiring the iconic architecture, as well as some of the more modern skyscrapers. It was time to close the chapter on my 2023 adventures and return home to celebrate the holidays and New Year's with my family. I can honestly say this was one of the best years of my life. I can't believe everything I fit in. As I relive all of these memories, last January in Mexico City feels like it was a lifetime ago. I'm so glad I took this leap of faith to start this channel and share these adventures with you, and shine a light on all of the beautiful cultures, destinations, and experiences our incredible planet has for us to learn from and enjoy. 2024 promises even more adventures, and I can't wait to take you guys along. Make sure you're subscribed and let's explore this world together.